The gavel struck once, a hollow echo that swallowed every whisper in the courtroom. Across the aisle, my sister sat with her legs crossed, that familiar smirk carved across her face. The kind of smile that says, "I've already won." She had everything now, the house, the savings, the legacy of our father, all signed away by a will that looked too perfect to be questioned. I didn't cry that day. I just watched the papers on the desk, my father's signature glaring back at me like a ghost I didn't recognize. But what she didn't know was this: my father had left one last thing behind. Not wealth, not property. A letter, sealed, hidden, waiting for the moment truth could finally breathe again. Sometimes justice doesn't come with anger. It comes with silence and a key. Growing up, my sister Clara was light, the kind that blinds you when you get too close. She was radiant, bold, and effortless in everything she did. Teachers adored her. Neighbors praised her. Even strangers remembered her name. And me. I was the quiet one, the listener, the keeper of everyone's words but rarely my own. I lived in the soft corners of our home, where silence was safer than comparison. Our father, a retired lawyer, used to say, "Fairness isn't in what you get, it's in what you deserve." Clara would nod like she already understood. I'd smile quietly, pretending I did too. But maybe fairness was never meant to look the same to both of us. When Dad's health began to fade, time slowed in our house. The walls smelled like medicine and lemon disinfectant. The clock ticked louder, as if counting down something we didn't want to name. Clara visited when she could, bouquets in hand, perfume strong enough to cover guilt. She'd take a few photos by his bedside, caption them later with "Cherish every moment." I didn't blame her. I told myself people love in different ways. My way was staying. I was there through the nights when his breathing grew shallow. I was the one who labeled his pills, adjusted his blanket, and listened to his stories that repeated like old records. He'd hold my hand sometimes and say softly, "You have my patience, you know. Clara has my fire. But both are strength if you use them right." When he finally left us, it wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, like he just decided he'd done enough. The funeral felt surreal. The air was heavy, full of faces that didn't know what to say. Clara arrived late but beautiful as ever. Black dress, flawless hair, eyes perfectly teary. She hugged me tightly and whispered, "We'll handle everything together, okay?" I believed her, because I always did. But together lasted exactly 1 week. When the lawyer read the will, I waited for my name. I waited for even a small acknowledgement, the garden, the car, the smallest share. Instead, every word, every property, every memory with a price tag belonged to her. My name wasn't mentioned once. The lawyer looked down, uncomfortable. Clara looked up, smiling. Not in joy, but in triumph. Like she'd been waiting for this moment. That was the first time I understood how beautiful cruelty can look when it's confident. The same smile that once made me proud of her now made my stomach twist. I didn't say a word. I just sat there, hands folded, eyes still. Because sometimes silence is the only space where betrayal sounds clear enough to hear. I tried reasoning first. I still believed there had to be some mistake, a missing page, a misplaced clause, something human and fixable. So I called her. "Clara," I said quietly, "do you think maybe Dad made an error in the will?" There was a pause. I could hear her exhale, that slow, performative sigh she'd mastered since childhood. Then she said, Maybe he knew who could actually handle responsibility. Her voice was light, almost kind, but every word dripped sugar-coated poison. I didn't argue. I just listened to her tone, the kind people use when they've already decided you don't matter. After that call, nights stopped feeling like nights. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment with Dad, every conversation, every time I'd seen him write or sign something. Something didn't fit. Something in that perfect signature, that steady curve of his name, felt wrong. He hadn't written like that in months. His hands had trembled near the end. Days turned into weeks. My life felt like it was moving through fog. I went to work, came home, existed. But inside, there was a knot that refused to loosen. One evening, I drove to Dad's old study. The house felt colder without him. Every creak in the woods sounded like an echo of his voice. Dust floated in the air, slow and heavy, like time itself was reluctant to move on. That's when I saw it, the leather briefcase, the one he never let anyone touch. It sat tucked under his desk, worn around the edges, its brass lock dull with age. I hesitated before opening it, as if I was trespassing in memory. Inside were his old law notes, handwritten pages of cases, signatures, and personal letters. But beneath them, hidden carefully between two folders, was a sealed envelope. It was addressed, in his handwriting, to Mr. Harrison, his lawyer. My heart stopped. I held it for a long time, staring at the seal like it might burn me. My hands trembled so hard I almost dropped it. It wasn't my place to open it. Not yet. But my gut screamed that whatever was inside would change everything. I put it away, for the moment. Meanwhile, Clara was busy dismantling our history piece by piece. She started selling things. Dad's car. His books. Even the piano Mom used to play when we were kids. Within a month, the house was up for sale. I didn't find out from her. I got a message. A single line that said, "Come by this weekend to clear your things before we close." No warmth. No hesitation. Just logistics. When I showed up, she was there, walking through the living room like a stranger admiring someone else's home. She laughed when she saw my face. "Come on, don't look at me like that. It's just business. You've always been sentimental." Her laughter filled the empty space, bouncing off walls stripped of photos and memories. That sentence, that careless cruelty, broke something inside me. Not loudly. Not all at once. It cracked quietly, like porcelain under too much pressure. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about respect. About memory. About everything Dad had stood for. Truth, fairness, integrity, all twisted into something she could sell. That night, I sat in my car outside the house for a long time. The lights inside flickered off one by one until only the porch light remained. I thought about Dad, his calm voice, his steady eyes, his words. Fairness isn't in what you get, it's in what you deserve. And for the first time, I understood what he meant. So I made a promise, not to fight her out of anger, but to honor him through truth. Because the truth doesn't shout. It waits. And when it finally speaks, even the loudest laughter goes silent. The next few weeks felt like walking through fog, thick, cold, and full of half-seen shapes. Everywhere I turned, Clara's voice seemed to arrive before me. She charmed everyone, the lawyer, the neighbors, even old family friends who once called me the responsible one. Now they tilted their heads with pity when they saw me. I heard whispers. She's not taking it well. Poor thing. Must be emotional. Clara had spun a story, one where I was unstable, irrational, too fragile to handle legal matters. And because she smiled while saying it, people believed her. That's the thing about charm. It's just manipulation wearing perfume. When I tried to contest the will, her attorney barely looked at me. He flipped through the pages lazily, smirking. Everything checks out, he said. Your father signed every page himself. I remember staring at that signature again. That steady slant, the perfect curve of each letter. It mocked me. My father had been shaking too badly in his final month to write his name without resting twice between strokes. This signature was too smooth, too alive. Something inside me refused to let it go. That night, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by scattered papers, bank statements, property transfers, medical reports. Every document I could find from his final months. I wasn't a lawyer, but I was my father's daughter, and he'd taught me how to see through lies wrapped in neat presentation. Patterns began to form. Dates that didn't match. Signatures that looked slightly too uniform. Then I saw it, a strange gap in the records. On the exact week Clara claimed she had visited him to check on things, Dad's nurse had taken an unplanned leave. No medical updates. No recorded visitors. Just silence. That date clung to me like static. I decided to visit Mr. Harding, my father's old colleague. He was in his 70s now, retired but sharp as ever. His office smelled like old wood and ink. When I mentioned the will, he frowned deeply. Your father always believed in dual verification, he said. He'd never sign a will without an attached validation note. A validation note. I'd never heard of it, but those words hit me like a door unlocking in my mind. I left his office with my pulse pounding. That was my clue. I drove home before the sun set, my fingers tightening around the steering wheel the entire way. The sky outside turned the color of bruised lavender, heavy and waiting. When I entered Dad's study again, the air felt different, charged, like the room had been waiting for this moment too. I took out the leather briefcase. My hands shook as I unlocked it. The brass clicked open, soft but final. The sealed envelope was still there, untouched, waiting. I hesitated. I whispered, I hope I'm doing the right thing, Dad. Then I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. His handwriting, frail, uneven, but undeniably his. My breath caught as I read. If this reaches the court, let the truth be read. My will is not complete without this letter. That single line felt heavier than every accusation I could have ever spoken. My father had known. He had seen it coming. The manipulation, the charm, the quiet deceit. He hadn't fought her directly. He had fought her with the law. For a moment, I just sat there in silence, holding the page like it was sacred. Because it was. It was proof that the man I trusted most had trusted me in return. But the silence didn't last. The next day, Clara called. Her voice was bright, almost cheerful. Hey, just reminding you, the movers will come tomorrow. Please make sure your stuff's out by then. There was no trace of guilt, no hesitation, just control. I remember staring out the window after hanging up. The rain had started to fall, soft at first, then heavier. Each drop slid down the glass like the seconds I'd wasted waiting for fairness. That's when I realized, fairness doesn't arrive on its own. You have to walk it to the door yourself. The letter was my beginning. I didn't know how yet, but I knew one thing for certain. The next time Clara smiled, she'd have to do it under oath. Because the truth was no longer buried. It had a name. It had a signature. And it was finally in my hands. I sat alone in the dark. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the old ceiling fan and the rustle of rain against the windows. On the desk before me, Dad's letter glowed softly under the lamplight, the ink aged, the edges trembling just slightly in the draft. Every word pulsed with his quiet strength. Each line was a heartbeat of the man I once leaned on for clarity. He had seen it coming. Clara's charm, her ambition, the way she could twist truth until it begged to sound believable. But he'd never chosen confrontation. He trusted the law more than raised voices. He always said, "If you stay calm long enough, lies burn themselves out." I used to think that meant staying silent. Now I understood it meant staying steady. That night, something shifted inside me. The grief didn't disappear, but it found direction. The tears stopped, and in their place came focus, sharp, cold, and strangely peaceful. For the first time, I didn't feel powerless. I began to move slowly, deliberately. The same house that had felt like a graveyard of memories now became my evidence room. I pulled out folders, old phones, emails, anything that could piece together the last days of my father's life. Each paper, each photo, was a fragment of truth I had once overlooked. I found a text Clara had sent me the week Dad was hospitalized. "Don't come by tonight. He's resting. I've got it handled." 3 hours later, a security camera outside the hospital showed her arriving with a brown envelope. No flowers. No food. Just papers. It was like watching a puzzle quietly click into place, one I'd been too naive to solve before. Still, I needed proof stronger than coincidence. I called Dad's nurse, Mrs. Keller. Her voice cracked the moment I mentioned his name. When I asked about that particular day, the one I couldn't find any medical updates for, she paused. "Clara came that afternoon," she said softly. "She told me he needed to sign some documents. He was heavily sedated, barely awake." My hand tightened around the phone. "Did you see him sign?" I saw her guide his hand," she whispered. I didn't think it was my place to interfere. Silence. Heavy, breathless silence. That was it. The final piece. The puzzle was complete. But instead of rage, I felt something else. Resolve. I didn't want to scream or expose her in front of everyone. Anger was loud, and loud things lose power too fast. I wanted clarity, something pure, something that would stand, even when she tried to twist it. And the only place that still honored truth, the kind that couldn't be charmed or silenced, was the courtroom my father once stood in. I could almost hear his voice echo through the walls of memory. Justice doesn't need volume. It needs patience. That night, I prepared every document, bank statements, dates, photos, testimonies. I arranged them like armor, each page a silent witness waiting to speak. As the hours passed, I found myself whispering aloud to the empty room. "You trusted the law, Dad. I'll do the same." There was something sacred in that promise. When morning came, the world looked different. The rain had stopped. The streets shimmered like polished glass. For the first time in months, I opened the curtains wide. Light spilled across the desk, landing directly on the letter. It looked less like a relic now, and more like a command. I slipped it into a folder, held it close to my chest, and exhaled. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about restoration, about honoring a man who built his life on truth, and reminding his daughter that silence isn't weakness when it's filled with intent. That day, I called my lawyer. I didn't tremble when I spoke. I didn't stumble over words. "I'd like to reopen my father's case," I said. "And this time," I added softly, "I'm bringing the missing page." For a moment, there was nothing but the hum of the line. Then came his quiet response. "Bring it in. We'll let the truth do the talking." When I hung up, I felt something I hadn't in a long time, peace edged with purpose. The story wasn't over. But for the first time, I wasn't waiting for the next storm. I was walking toward it, steady and unafraid, because the truth was no longer a whisper trapped in an envelope. It was a voice, mine, ready to be heard. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and quiet tension, the kind that hums beneath every whispered conversation, every shuffled paper, every breath held just a little too long. Sunlight filtered through tall, dusted windows, catching particles in midair like suspended moments. It was morning, yet the air felt heavy, charged, as if truth itself had been waiting to be summoned. And then she walked in. Clara, dressed in white, her innocence uniform. Her heels clicked against the marble like punctuation marks of confidence. She carried herself like someone who believed charm could still win the day. Her lawyer followed closely behind, smug, already smirking like the verdict was written in her favor. For a brief second, our eyes met. She smiled, that same polished smile she wore at the funeral. The one that said, "I always win." But I wasn't the same sibling who used to look away anymore. When the judge entered, the room stilled. The bailiff's voice echoed, "All rise," and for a heartbeat, it felt like the world was holding its breath. We took our seats. And the war began, not with shouting, but with paper. Her attorney started first. Smooth, confident, almost rehearsed. He presented the will, waved the pages with the assurance of a man who thought logic was on his side. "Everything checks out, Your Honor," he said. "Mr. Callahan's wishes were clear. The assets go to Miss Clara Callahan. Signed and witnessed." Clara nodded, her eyes glancing toward me, soft, pitying, like I was a child throwing a tantrum I couldn't win. Then it was our turn. My lawyer stood. Calm, precise. He placed the forged will on the table, right in the center, the so-called proof of her triumph. "We don't dispute this document exists," he began. "But we dispute how it came to be." Clara leaned back, crossing her legs, that easy confidence still painted across her face. "That's exactly how Dad wanted it," she said sweetly. Her words dripped with practiced innocence, but I stayed silent, because I knew what came next. I reached into my bag and pulled out a single envelope, sealed, yellowed, the handwriting unmistakably his. The weight of it was more than paper. It was legacy. "Your Honor," I said quietly, standing. "This was found in my father's briefcase." It was addressed to his lawyer, sealed, untouched, verified by handwriting experts. "It's his final instruction." The room seemed to lean forward. The judge took the envelope, examined the seal, and nodded for the clerk to open it. Every sound vanished. Even the clock on the wall seemed to hesitate. The letter was unfolded. And then, silence. You could hear every word as it was read aloud, each one like a heartbeat. "If this letter is read, it means deceit has touched my legacy. Only the child who stood by truth shall inherit what I built. The law will see what my eyes could not in my final days. Dad's voice, written in ink, echoed louder than any argument. I didn't move. I just watched as the meaning sank in, watched the color drain from Clara's face like someone had pulled the curtain from her lies. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Her lawyer leaned in, whispering something, his confidence cracking at the edges. Murmurs spread across the courtroom, sharp, hushed gasps blending into disbelief. For a moment, the judge simply looked at the letter, then at Clara, then back at me. My lawyer began presenting the evidence, piece by piece, truth by truth. The nurse's testimony, the medical records showing sedation levels, the timestamp of Clara's visit aligning with the forged signature, and finally, the forensic ink analysis proving that 2 pens, 2 hands, had been used. Each revelation felt like the slow unraveling of a thread she thought no one would ever find. Her attorney's tone faltered, his objections growing weaker, desperate. At one point, Clara tried to speak. That's not true. He was awake. He knew what he was signing. But her voice trembled, and the judge simply raised a hand, silencing her. The truth didn't need defense anymore. It was standing on its own. When the session recessed, I sat there quietly, tracing the edge of Dad's letter with my fingers. I could almost feel his presence, steady, patient, unshaken. The second half of the trial was quick. Facts had already spoken louder than denial ever could. The judge's expression carried no anger, just clarity, the kind of solemn respect truth demands. The court recognizes fraudulent activity in the execution of this will, he said finally, and restores all assets and authority to the rightful heir. The sound of the gavel was softer than I expected, a single solid note that echoed through my chest like closure. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. Clara sat frozen beside her lawyer, her once perfect posture collapsing, her hands trembling in her lap. That bright, confident glow she wore so effortlessly was gone. All that remained was silence, the kind of silence that humbles even the proudest heart. As the judge left the bench, I stayed seated a moment longer. The courtroom emptied slowly, whispers trailing like echoes down the hallway. I looked at the letter one last time, folded it carefully, and slipped it back into its envelope. Dad had spoken, even from silence, and I realized something. Justice doesn't roar. It resonates. When I finally walked outside, the sun hit my face, warm and quiet. The world felt different, not because I'd won, but because the truth had. And for the first time since he left, I felt him there, not as a ghost, but as a promise kept. Because fairness isn't in what you get, it's in what you deserve. And that day, the law didn't just restore what was mine. It restored him. Weeks later, I returned to the old house. The door creaked the same way it always had, like an old friend sighing at your return. The air smelled of dust and memory, that faint blend of wood polish and time that only old homes carry. Sunlight fell through the curtains in quiet stripes, painting the floor with gold and shadow. I stood in the hallway, where Dad used to hang his coat after every long day in court. It still smelled faintly of him, faintly of justice and gentleness. I wasn't there as a victor, just a daughter finally at peace. Each room told a story. The kitchen still held the echo of his laughter. The study, his world of books, notes, and neatly stacked papers, felt untouched, like time had waited for me to return before moving on. I ran my fingers along the edge of his old desk. That's where I placed the letter, framed now, beneath glass, right where his nameplate once sat. His handwriting looked softer under the sunlight. The same line I'd read 100 times still pierced deeper than any judgment. Only the child who stood by truth shall inherit what I built. I whispered it out loud, just once, letting it linger in the silence. Truth doesn't need noise, it needs patience. For a long time, I thought justice meant confrontation, victory, or retribution. But standing there, surrounded by everything he'd built, I realized it was never about taking something back. It was about proving it was never hers to keep. Clara vanished from public view after the verdict. The news mentioned her briefly: fraud investigation, family dispute, and then silence. I didn't chase her. I didn't curse her. I just let time do what anger never could: erase her power over me. There's a strange peace in letting go, especially when you've already won the only battle that mattered, the one within yourself. Some nights I still dream of that courtroom, the light, the letter, the echo of the gavel. But in those dreams, Dad isn't distant anymore. He's sitting beside me, quietly smiling, as if to say, "You did it the right way." Now, the house isn't heavy with grief. It breathes again, calm, honest, alive. I keep the windows open. I water the garden he once tended. And every evening I sit by his desk, tracing the edge of the letter that changed everything. Because justice isn't loud. It doesn't seek applause. It simply waits for the moment silence becomes truth. And when that moment finally arrives, it doesn't echo like thunder. It resonates, softly, completely, like a father's voice finding its way back home. Sometimes, silence is the loudest form of revenge. You don't need to scream for justice. Just let truth stand where lies once sat. Because karma never rushes. It arrives exactly on time. Tell me, have you ever seen silence win louder than words? Like, comment, and subscribe. More stories of justice, truth, and quiet strength are waiting for you.